Well, welcome everyone. I'm Linda Farley, and from time to time, I like to do interviews with authors to inspire other people to write. So today we have a fascinating author and world traveler, Clare Novak. I've known Clare for about 15 years as a colleague, but also as a dear friend. And I'm always fascinated and entertained by what she's doing. We're going to learn a lot from Clare today. So Claire is an award-winning international consultant with over 25 years experience, and she's worked extensively in the United States and around the world. And because of that extensive list, in a minute, I'm going to have her tell you where she's worked because she can pronounce the names right. And that's not all. She is a nature lover. She's a hiker. She's an excellent photographer, as well as an author. So Claire, tell us where all of you traveled and what have you been doing?
Well, what I've been doing for the past several years is working in developing nations. I work directly with companies in those countries, generally in the types of industries that in the past have been heavily male dominated in terms of numbers of employees. And I work with those companies to hire more women into the paid workforce and to hire them into a greater variety of positions within those companies. So it's a fabulous challenge and I love doing it. And because of that, I have worked in alphabetical order, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Canada, Croatia, Egypt, Georgia, the country, not the state, Jordan, Kenya, Kuwait, North Macedonia, Nigeria, Pakistan, Turkey, Ukraine, and Uzbekistan.
Wow. That is really impressive, and I'm glad that I made you pronounce all those. So you've been doing some really good work for women as well as businesses around the world, and I know that you've made a really big impact. I've been in some of your training courses. I've worked with you as a consultant, and I know that you make a real impact on people. So that's really exciting. Tell me about, I want to get into your writing because one of the reasons I know about Claire's writing is because she writes these fabulous emails to her inner group every time she's going into a new country, and she tells us about all her adventures, and we keep saying, you need to write a book, you need to write a book. And so here Claire is, she's written books now. So all of those years of prompting have really been have gotten us some really good books. But what experience did you have in writing before you ever started your first book?
My writing goes way, way back into ancient history when dinosaurs still roamed the earth and people wrote actual letters on pieces of paper. So even now that my friends get emails, that tradition started way back when my friends and I dispersed from high school into colleges all over the area, and we actually wrote to each other. And in college, I wrote and had published in the college literary magazine some poems and short stories. So I've just kind of always written. I was on probably, I think was on like the yearbook staff, you know, those kinds of things that you get started early in high school and college. And it's just something I kept up. And then when I got into the professional world, I started publishing business articles.
Wow. So did all those things help you writing your first book? That kind of probably is an obvious answer, but tell us about that.
Well, moving into the business world, which is the first place I did publish books, it helped to have the experience of being published and having articles published, so that the experience of writing for a professional audience, I knew I had acceptance. Had articles accepted through Association for Talent Development in what was back then called Training and Development Magazine. And also there was a second magazine focused on technical training, had an article published there, and then had an article published with the Association for Psychological Type. So it was that let me know that I wrote well enough that there would be acceptance to go beyond articles and do longer works.
Okay. Okay. So it gave you some courage, right? So maybe that's something that new authors or budding authors want to think about, is kind of start small and just get your toe in the water, write some articles before you start that first book.
Yeah, particularly if you're in the business world. And what also happened is ATD, Association for Talent Development, published these things called info lines, which are short, essentially how to do things pamphlets. And I got, I think, 3 of those published. So get yourself out there. Now, you're not going to get paid for that stuff, but you are going to get experience in how to focus, how to edit, how to address a professional audience. And so I've been told, I don't know, I'm not so involved in the training society anymore, but I'm told that I wrote the bestseller of info lines, which is this one. About making the financial case for performance improvement. So again, see, not a whole book commitment, but enough to learn the style and what to do for professional audiences.
What a great idea to get with your professional association and try to write for them, and even just do some things for volunteer. That's wonderful. So what was your first book that you wrote?
My first book, and I laugh at myself because I did exactly the opposite of what they tell you to do as a writer. They tell you your first book should be specifically for a commercial audience. And once you get that published and out there, then you write the book that you love and have to write. Well, I did it the other way around. No surprise. Linda knows me. She knows I don't do things conventionally. So research, do your homework, listen to the wisdom, and then do what feels right to you. So my first book was actually a much longer version of the article that I published in the Association for Psychological Type Bulletin. I was studying for the Myers-Briggs, that's based on Jung. I was reading a great deal about archetype, and at the same time doing a lot of leadership development. So my brain clicked the puzzle pieces together. And the book was titled Never Rule Without a Magician, a Sage, and a Fool. And the idea was, if you're going to lead, get the right help to lead right. You don't lead alone. You need people who will advise you and advise you in the right things, the right way. So that's where the first book came. It was a strange and interesting journey with that book. I loved the research. I was doing interlibrary loans from Penn State and Central Pennsylvania and getting these ancient thick books to read and research. I was having a ball. I love research. And I wrote it and I looked at it, I went, ew, this is so boring. I'm bored, and I wrote it and I didn't know how to fix it. So I just put it away. I didn't throw it away. I put it away. And then years later, I heard a British speaker with a dry sense of humor. And I thought, Eureka, I have that humorous voice. I know what to do now. And I pulled out the manuscript, completely rewrote it, put in my personal dry sense of humor, and took it to publicity.
I love it. And it's still on Amazon today. Yeah, it's still on Amazon because I looked it up before this interview to see if it was still. I have a copy of that book.
I do too.
Good. I love it. I love it. Well, so as you look back, because you kind of went at that in a probably not a way that you would suggest others to go.
No.
No. So what have you learned about process of writing books?
Well, it's interesting. A few weeks back, I went to hear science fiction writer Neil Stephenson speak locally, and an audience member asked him that same question. And I'm going to give you basically the same answer that he gave. And he says, I don't have one process.
Okay.
the material I'm working on dictates the process.
Okay.
And I found that's very true with the kinds of writing. Once I understood what I needed to do with that book, boom, it flew.
Yeah. You were able to
The
write the story and then you incorporate the facts and the science into it.
Yeah, once I understood the voice, which took me forever to get to, but once I understood the voice, then the writing process flowed easily. And I did work at the end with a professional editor, and she was very good and helped me to, as I think it was Stephen King said, sometimes you have to kill your darlings. And there were some wonderful stories I wanted to tell, and she goes, no, they don't fit. Get rid of them. And I was like, but I love them. I don't want to get rid of them. And she goes, like, get rid of them. So, if you're really going to do it, you may need a professional editor to help you refine the final product. So that one was different. And the one that I wrote for HR people, which is called EBITDA, Finance for HR Professionals, that was easy. The organization really flowed by the structure of finance. I had a CPA work with me to make sure everything was 100% correct. And that one was pretty quick. It probably was months in the writing rather than years. So the material and your familiarity with it, and whether you have to do research or whether it's something that's in your brain, kind of dictates what process. And on the fiction side, and sometimes on the poetry side, whatever it is my brain is doing while I'm not paying attention, it writes. And then all I do is sit down and type. The piece is written before my fingers ever hit a keyboard.
Yeah. Sometimes
There's no
it kind of
explaining.
pours out, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Your brain does something while you're not paying attention.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had that happen, and it's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. One of the little books I wrote, Charlie is a Rich Man, that came from a friend who lost her dog, and I loved this dog. He was actually my office assistant for a while, and he tried to fax one time, but when he passed away, I just was so overwhelmed with his loss, and this book just came out of my fingers, and it was pretty amazing. I wish that for all of you, that your books just could come out of your fingers without any thought. It doesn't always happen that way.
No, it doesn't.
Now, I
Not
know
at
that
all.
you wrote a book about Rebecca Lukens. Tell us about that. Who is she, first of all, and then why did you write a book about her?
Okay. Rebecca Lukens was the founder of Lukens Steel, the longest continuously operating steel mill in the United States. And when you ask an audience who founded the longest running steel mill, they will say Andrew Carnegie. Nope, it was a woman. It was Rebecca Lukens. And even right here in Pennsylvania, because Lukens Steel is just down the road from me in Coatesville, Pennsylvania, even if you ask people who lived here in Chester County, they don't know a woman built that up. That's wrong.
Absolutely.
Why don't we have women in their given place in history? And if you search, you're going to find tons of biographies about Andrew Carnegie, tons and tons about Henry Ford. So I thought, there's got to be a biography of Rebecca Lukens. Couldn't find one.
Oh, wow.
Went to the County Historical Society. They have her autobiography, which is about 6 pages long. So I called the Steel Museum in Coatesville on the Lukens property and said, have you got a biography of Rebecca Lukens? And there was this silence. And let me transfer you. Well, what there is basically a short pamphlet.
Oh, wow.
I was astounded. So me and my quest for fairness of women should have a rightful place in history. I know why there's not a biography, because there's so little directly written about her or by her that is not business correspondence. that to write a biography would require probably more of a commitment than I can make regarding research into, the society around her, and to try to fill out. So I understand very well now why there's not an adult biography. So I wrote a children's version because there is enough material to do for kids. I thought, well, kids should know who's in history. So that manuscript is out with one publisher. And if I don't hear from that publisher in a couple months, I'll keep trying. And, I have a couple more possibilities for seeing that through to fruition and publication.
Well, that is exciting. And I hope we see that on Amazon or some other really prominent site soon, because I think sometimes we think girls need to know this to inspire them, but boys need to know it too, just as much as girls do. Because if we don't teach the boys to respect women as business people also, then they don't get a seat at the table. And so it starts at this level, is having biographies, learning about successful women, and having a picture that women can be anything, just like a man really can be too. And we live in a wonderful time where we have lots of options, and we need to keep supporting that and driving that home. So I really applaud you for writing that, and I'm excited for that to come out. And I hope they also put it in the bookstore at the steel mill.
One way or another, I'll keep moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's one that I feel passionate about. And if it doesn't get picked up by a traditional publisher, I will find a route to get it out.
Oh, absolutely.
And interestingly, as I was doing the research, Rebecca Lukens was not the first and not the only woman in Pennsylvania to own an iron forge.
Really? So how many did you uncover?
Really? 3.
Wow.
And Teresa Crowley.
Okay.
And a mother-daughter team, Anna and Rebecca Nutt.
Now, was this in the early 1900s, or what time period was this in? 18. 18. End of the 18 or middle?
Middle. Rebecca was middle. Teresa Crowley was earlier. I don't recall the exact date. She may have actually been the very late 17s. And then Rebecca and Anna Nutt were essentially contemporaries of Rebecca Lukens.
When you think about those times, that was extremely unusual. It's kind of like the story of our grocery store, HEB, here in San Antonio, that was started by a woman. And the guy always gets the credit, but the person who started it was a woman. So often we get overlooked there. One of the things that I'm getting from you is to be curious and to be interested. You are interested in so many things, but as an author, there are a lot of things to write about. And so sometimes if you're not inspired, if it's not just pouring out of your head into your fingers, go out in the world and look and see what's going on, and see maybe who has been overlooked. And maybe it's not a huge, 1,000-page book. Maybe it is a children's book, so that you can start somewhere. So I love that idea. And I think that is really inspiring to new authors, is just to think about being curious. What you're curious about can often turn into a book for you. And it seems like that's what's happened with Rebecca.
Yes.
It's wonderful.
Yes, absolutely. Well, for me, it really started with the business in doing talks and bringing forth these women industrialists. I started searching for women in STEM careers in that middle 18 to early 1900s. And like, where are they? We can't, like, but there's tantalizingly little written about them. The first millionaire in Clearfield County, Pennsylvania, was a woman. She owned a soft coal mine.
Wow.
There were women miners in eastern Pennsylvania in the anthracite mines. How did I get to be an adult and not know that?
Yeah, and you've lived in Pennsylvania pretty much all your life, right? So,
Pretty
yeah.
much. I've lived a couple other places, but most of it's been here.
So the history's all around you and you don't even know it. Yeah, that is amazing.
Yeah, isn't that astounding?
That really is. You know, as I think about, you know, what we've already talked about as far as tips we can give to aspiring authors, what else would you tell them about getting started and just doing it?
As far as the writing piece is, just sit and write. It's when you move to publishing, so whatever makes you happy in your writing, whether it's sitting down and hacking out something that's a poem, or just writing down something you might do as a spoken word performance piece, or you have some snippet of a story in your head, just write it. Just let it fly. Don't censor yourself. And then when you think about moving from writing to publishing, be curious and educate yourself a bit about the process, because when you move to publishing, you're moving into a business. And that's critical information that some authors don't get, is you may think you've written like the most amazing thing on earth. That doesn't mean an agent or a publisher will. And so you've got to learn how to position yourself within the business of publishing. And there's professional societies that can help you. There's writers groups, there's writers circles. If you're not even sure if you want to get there, try to find a local writers circle. I want to thank my writers circles. I've had several, and I want to thank them all for their great input. For a while, I was with a small group from the Society for Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. So if you're thinking about going the children's route, that's one professional organization you could join. They have a ton of materials about publishing. Then I was part of the Women's Writers Circle that Susan Widener, a local author, hosted for a while. And then I'm part of a group where we meet virtually, thanks to Zoom. We were meeting in person, and we just use the time to write. And then we share with each other.
I was going to say, because I'm sorry. The writer groups are really good to just take a look at your writing, and you do a lot of reviewing with each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We do read arounds, and you can see people's reactions. And the way that the feedback was given is not so much critique of fix this or fix that, but this part really worked for me. This stood out. It was vivid. So the feedback is on what works and what you're doing well. There are critique groups. So if you want somebody to really tear into your manuscript and really go get rid of this and this and this and this, those groups exist too. So it really does take a village to hone your craft and really work at it.
How did you find your writers groups?
The first writers group I found because I was looking at the groups offered by the local library system.
Okay.
And I saw one that was hosted by Susan at the library, and I went, and she told us about the group that she hosted, and I decided to join. Okay. The other group I found through SCBWI. That's a lot of letters. I have trouble with those letters. And they're easy to find. There's lots of groups out there. You might, if it's easy for you, just start with your local library and see if somebody's formed a writers group. And if not, form it yourself.
Well, and that is true. Sometimes we overlook the fact that if one doesn't exist, we can form it. I mean, sometimes you'll find them on Google. And there's also a website that has a lot of different types of groups, not just writers groups, called meetup.com. And many of the major cities, and not necessarily the biggest cities, but many cities have access to meetup.com, and people list different events and groups. So that may be one thing for people to try. And sometimes it just helps you to be with other writers to inspire you or to make you move forward. Maybe you've kind of been stuck for a while. So I think that can be really positive too, right?
Absolutely. And just knowing that you're going to need something to read at the group is enough sometimes to get you to sit down and write something.
Right.
So it's that little extra push.
Absolutely, because we do tend to put it off. Sometimes we all have a book, and many of us have a book in our head, and it takes some discipline to sit down and write a book. So it does take discipline, and sometimes that motivation is really good. What have been your experience in have you done any self-publishing? Because I know you've worked with publishers. So can you give us some tips around that?
Sure. Both my books were self-published. The articles were published traditionally. I did it two different ways. One was done early on before you had all the electronic platforms and you could do all of your own work that way. And so I worked through a self-publishing press, and they're fee for service. They do not market you, but they did give you a way to get your book into print and a platform to sell it from. And then and at that time it was hard or soft cover copies. There were no electronic copies. So that was what I did there. In the second book, there was an electronic platform called Create Space, which has since been sold to Kindle, and it's Kindle Direct Publishing. So that one's only out in electronic version, but it's out there, and that's the finance book for the for human resources folks. So I've used both. Again, it's just a matter of do your homework, look at what's best for you, look at how much work you want to put in it versus how much you want to pay somebody else to do it. For example, your cover art. Do you want to use something that's just, kind of computer generated? Do you want to pay an illustrator? If you're going to work with an illustrator, it's important to really look at it as what it is, which is hiring. So it has to be somebody you work with, somebody you can understand your vision of the pictures. And also then to think, well, will I sell enough of this book to even recoup the cost of illustration? Do I care about that? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But illustrators need to be paid fairly for their work. So it's an investment if you're going to use an illustrator. So those are decisions that you make along the way with self-publishing. For example, with my first book, I did pay an artist to do the cover art, and I love it, so I'm glad I paid him. On the second one, I just did an electronic cut and paste because it was going to be entirely electronic. And to me, finance didn't require creative illustration. So basically, I used a template for that one. So it depends on the work. And then you need to do your research and figure out how it is. But regardless of how your book is published, be prepared to do your own marketing. Yeah. Even traditional publishers will want you to come with a marketing plan in place. And who's in your circle that you can sell to? How many people is it? Are you willing to go out there and talk at libraries and schools and bookstores? And, you have to market your own book.
Yeah. Well,
unless you're one of the very, very few.
Yeah, I mean, the Stephen King probably doesn't have to do that anymore, right?
No, he doesn't.
Yes, but when you're starting, and for many of us, for most of our careers, you have to do that. And I know that they expect a lot of social media presence too. That's one of the things they look for. So, I think there's two ways of looking at publishing. Is one, I want to make money. Two, I just want my book out there. I don't care if anybody buys it. I just love seeing it on Amazon. And either way is fine. Do what you want. But I think that your point about, you're not going to publish this book and make $1 million unless, you're an anomaly. That's just normally not going to happen. Yeah. Well, I know you've got another book that I am so excited about. Tell us about what you've got up your sleeve now.
Oh gosh, for the sheer fun of it. And that's a perfectly good reason to write in my book, is if it's fun, go for it. I started writing a series of books about beagles, because beagles have kind of been the family dog through multi-generations. And my niece in particular have rescued over the years 7, I think, beagles from rescues, and they've all had unique personalities. And so we would, when we were together at family gatherings, kind of joke about the personality of each beagle. And then somehow it hit me one day, and I have no idea where this came from, other than it felt like a fun thing to do. I started writing stories in which the beagles rescue people. And so I've written 3. Well, it's actually not the first one I wrote, but the second one I'm in the process of self-publishing now. I also, crazy person that I am, was talked into by my one of my writing circle groups to doing my own illustrations, because one of my more minor talents is painting and drawing. So I'm a little shaky on the illustration piece. So when it gets out there, those may not be the best you've ever seen. But I'm going to give it a go. And don't tell anybody this, because it's a huge secret. I'm trying to get that one published for my great nephew's first birthday this year.
That is great. What a wonderful gift. Oh my. So can I show the illustration you sent me? And you're so funny. You are so talented in so many things, and you don't even think about it. I could never do this, but I am just thrilled with this. I think it's beautiful. I didn't even know that you did it yourself. So that's exciting.
Well, thanks. Yeah. Over the years, I've done a watercolor portrait of each of my niece and her husband's beagles. And I've also done portraits. Her brother has had German short hair pointers. So I've also done German short hair pointer pictures. I've never done a long haired dog. Don't know if I can do it. And I did one year, one of my Society for Human Resource friends, I was showing her these pictures, and she said, "We have a beagle. Can you paint a picture of our beagle for my husband for Christmas?" And I said, "Sure." So I did an out of the family beagle as well.
Oh, I love that. Now, how did you do this? Is it acrylic, watercolor? Tell us.
It's the original's watercolor. What I did was I photographed the watercolor. And then in the original watercolor, he was facing out of the book cover, so I had to flip it so that he'd be facing the right direction. And then I just used a computer drawing program to add the purple collar and the gold medallion, his little medal for heroism there. But the original portrait was watercolor.
Oh, I love it. Well, are you, so when is this, do you have any expectation as to when this is going to come out?
Well, my great nephew's birthday is the middle of March. So.
Wow, it's going to be fast. So what's the name?
Yeah, it's going to be called Homely Hero. And I'm struggling with the software, and that's not the software's problem. It's a user issue. So I'm learning the software to get it self-published. And if I get desperate, I'll find a small child that understands software.
The local high school is a great resource. Right?
Yeah.
So this is going to be available on Amazon?
Yeah, it's going to be published through Kindle Direct.
Okay. So if you would like to know more about Claire's publishing and find some of her things that she's written, even the finance book, which is not my most exciting one, but I have been on a webinar where you taught that, and it's fascinating. It's things that I don't normally think about, so I loved it. But that you can go to Amazon.com and find it. So, well, tell me what I'm so impressed with the range of work that you do. And I think some of us are much more focused on just one area, but you're so multi-talented. And, you know, I'm going to throw this in that the picture behind Claire today is actually a photograph that she took. So we have a lot of nature photographs. And if you want to see more of her photography, and also read some about her travels, which is fun to read just in itself. Claire, where can they go to find those?
Well, thanks for asking about that, Linda. It's real simple. It's my name, clarenovak.com. The only tricky part is you actually have to spell Claire correctly. My Claire spelling has no I in it. It's just C-L-A-R-E. And if you put an I in it, I don't know whose website you will get.
Could be some other interesting one, but yeah.
I don't know.
Do you have any parting words for our audience before we close out today?
I would say one of the most important things is do what feels right to you, what feels in alignment with who you are, with what your talents are. And if it feels right to you, trust yourself that it has merit and you should go ahead with it. Linda knows me, I don't think I've ever done anything the way people say you're supposed to do it. So I'm a great advocate of do it the way that works for you and that you get it done. So, you know, don't tie yourself up in not saying, well, the experts told me I should do it this way or that way, or I shouldn't say it this way. I should say, just write it, work with it, get some feedback on it. And, you know, it does take a village. And I really do want to thank all of the people who have given me feedback, my inner circle who gets my emails, my writers groups, people who have poked and prodded and pushed and everything else. I don't think I would have brought some of these projects as far along if it hadn't been for the village. So find a village that's going to help you move forward and then do what feels right to you to get yourself from the place of writing and then from writing into publishing.
Thank you so much, Claire, for giving us your time today. And I know that you're going to inspire a lot of people. So this is Linda Farley with Clare Novak. Thank you so much for joining us today. And now go out there and write that book.